Look, parenting is a trip, right? It's messy, it's exhausting, and it's filled with enough questionable advice to make your head spin faster than a toddler on a sugar high. Enter the Dad Challenge podcast, a show that dives headfirst into the chaos of modern fatherhood with a healthy dose of humor and a side of, shall we say, pointed commentary. The host, let's call him Mike for the sake of this already lengthy sentence, isn't afraid to call out the BS of the parenting industrial complex, the often ridiculous expectations placed on dads, and the occasional questionable choices made by, well, other dads. It's not your typical, oh, look at my adorable baby kind of podcast. This isn't a safe space for cutesy anecdotes and endless discussions about sleep schedules. This is a podcast that tackles the tough stuff, the uncomfortable truths, and the often hypocritical world of online parenting advice, all while making you laugh and maybe squirm along the way. It's a space where dads, and let's be honest, probably a lot of moms too, can come together and say, wait, is anyone else seeing this? Am I the only one who thinks this influencer's perfect life is a carefully curated facade? Because here's the thing about parenting, especially in the age of social media. It's become a weird competition, a performance where everyone's trying to outdo each other with the cutest outfits, the most Instagrammable snacks, and the most well-behaved, or at least well-photographed, children. And Mike, with his quick wit and his no-holds-barred commentary, is here to call bullshit on the whole charade. He's like that friend we all have, the one who isn't afraid to tell you your baby's Halloween costume is actually kind of creepy, or that maybe, just maybe, you're overthinking the whole sleep training thing. But he's also the friend who will be there for you when your kid throws a tantrum in the middle of the supermarket, the one who gets it, who understands the unique brand of crazy that comes with being a parent. And that's what makes the Dad Challenge so compelling. It's real, it's raw, and it's a welcome antidote to the often overwhelming pressure to be the perfect parent. Let's be honest, folks. Humor, especially the kind that involves a bit of snark and a healthy dose of cynicism, is often just a defense mechanism. It's a way to cope with the absurdity of life, the frustrations we all feel, and the things we'd rather not confront directly. And in the case of the Dad Challenge, Mike's humor, his tendency to point out the ridiculousness of it all, is in many ways a way to protect himself. Parenting is vulnerable, man. You're putting yourself out there, trying to raise a decent human being in a world that often feels like it's actively trying to sabotage your efforts. And when you're feeling exposed, vulnerable, what better way to shield yourself than with a wall of jokes and witty observations? It's like emotional armor, deflecting the blows of judgment, self-doubt, and the ever-present fear that you're screwing it all up. By using humor, Mike creates a safe distance between himself and the often overwhelming emotions that come with being a dad. He can address the challenges, the frustrations, and the anxieties of fatherhood without completely crumbling under the weight of it all. It's a coping mechanism, sure, but it's also a way to connect with his listeners, to create a sense of camaraderie among the sleep-deprived masses who are just trying to navigate the trenches of parenthood without losing their minds. And let's not forget the critique, the element of the Dad Challenge that really gets people talking. By calling out the hypocrisies, the questionable advice, and the often exploitative nature of the online parenting world, Mike is, in a way, protecting his listeners. He's pointing out the pitfalls, the potential dangers, and the things we should all be questioning before we blindly follow the latest parenting trend. It's like he's saying, hey, I'm calling this stuff out so you don't have to. I'm gonna poke fun at these ridiculous expectations so you can feel a little less alone in your own imperfections. And in a world where we're constantly bombarded with images of perfect families and expert advice, that kind of honesty, even if it's delivered with a sarcastic bite, can be incredibly refreshing. Now, some might say Mike's a bit of a cynic, a bit too quick to point out the flaws and failings of others, and maybe they're right. But here's the thing about cynicism. It often stems from a place of deep caring, a desire to see things be better, even if that means shining a light on the ugly bits. And in the case of the Dad Challenge, that cynicism, that frustration is channeled into a very specific role, the watchdog. Mike becomes a voice for the voiceless, a protector of the vulnerable. He's not just calling out bad parenting advice for the hell of it, although, let's be real, it's probably pretty fun. He's doing it because he sees the potential harm, the way these narratives can impact real families, real kids. He's particularly attuned to the ways in which children are often exploited in the online world, used as props for likes, followers, and brand deals. Remember that whole influencer kid phenomenon? Yeah, Mike was not having it. He saw right through the carefully curated feeds, the staged photo shoots, and the inherent creepiness of it all, and he wasn't afraid to say it, to call out the parents who were more concerned with building their own brands than protecting the privacy and well-being of their children. This is where his watchdog identity really comes into play. He becomes a voice for those kids, the ones who don't have a say in how their lives are broadcast to the world. He's holding parents accountable, reminding them that their children are not commodities, but human beings deserving of respect, privacy, and protection. And it's not just about online exploitation. Mike's watchdog role extends to the broader parenting landscape. He's quick to call out harmful stereotypes, unrealistic expectations, and the often toxic masculinity that permeates so much of fatherhood. He's challenging the status quo, pushing back against the notion that dads should be stoic, unemotional figures who are more comfortable grilling burgers than changing diapers. This is where his personal frustrations, his own experiences as a father, likely fuel his passion. It's one thing to observe these issues from a distance, but when you're living them, when you're grappling with the societal pressures and expectations placed upon fathers, it hits different. And that lived experience gives his commentary a weight and authenticity that resonates with his listeners. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, or maybe it's more accurate to say the screaming toddler in the supermarket aisle. Not everyone's a fan of the dad challenge. Some folks find Mike's style abrasive, his humor a bit too biting, and his critiques downright mean-spirited. And you know what? They might have a point. The thing about humor, especially when it's laced with sarcasm and social commentary, is that it's subjective. What one person finds hilarious, another might find offensive. And when you're dealing with a topic as sensitive and personal as parenting, well, let's just say there's bound to be some disagreement. Mike's approach is undeniably polarizing. He's not afraid to call people out, to name names, and to hold individuals accountable for their actions. And in a world where we're often encouraged to be polite, to avoid conflict, and to never ever criticize someone's parenting choices, his willingness to speak his mind can feel like a breath of fresh air, or a swift kick to the shins, depending on your perspective. Those who appreciate his style often praise his honesty, his willingness to say what they're thinking, but are too afraid to voice themselves. They see him as a necessary counterpoint to the often saccharine world of online parenting, a voice of reason in a sea of curated perfection. To them, he's not being mean, he's being real. He's calling out bullshit, and sometimes, bullshit needs to be called out, even if it ruffles a few feathers along the way. But then, there are those who find his approach unnecessarily harsh, his tone condescending, and his critiques lacking in empathy. They argue that he's too quick to judge, too eager to tear others down, and that his brand of humor is more hurtful than it is funny. They might agree with some of his points, but they take issue with his delivery, his tendency to mock and ridicule, rather than engage in thoughtful debate. And then there's the issue of bias. Some accuse Mike of having a specific agenda, of targeting certain individuals or groups, while giving others a free pass. They point to instances where his criticism seems personal, fueled by something more than just a desire to improve the parenting landscape. It's easy to see how this perception arises, especially when his commentary is often delivered with a healthy dose of sarcasm and wit. This is the tricky thing about being a social commentator, particularly in the age of social media. It's impossible to please everyone, and even with the best intentions, your words can be misinterpreted, taken out of context, and used to fuel existing divisions. Section 5. The danger of the single narrative nuance gets lost in the outrage. Here's the thing about a podcast like The Dad Challenge, a show that thrives on calling out hypocrisy and sparking debate. It's easy to get caught up in the outrage, to focus solely on the most inflammatory moments and miss the bigger picture. When we reduce complex issues to sound bites and social media spats, we lose the nuance, the context, and the possibility for meaningful dialogue. Mike's critics often accuse him of painting with broad strokes, of lumping entire groups of people together based on their parenting choices. And to be fair, there are times when his generalizations can feel a bit reductive, a tad too quick to categorize and label. But it's important to remember that The Dad Challenge is, at its core, a comedy podcast. And comedy, by its very nature, often relies on exaggeration, stereotypes, and a certain level of absurdity to make its point. The danger lies in mistaking satire for serious policy proposals. When we treat every joke as a literal statement of belief, every sarcastic quip as a call to arms, we miss the opportunity to engage with the underlying issues in a meaningful way. We get bogged down in arguments about tone and delivery, rather than addressing the substantive concerns that sparked the conversation in the first place. Take, for example, Mike's frequent critiques of the influencer parent phenomenon. He's quick to point out the potential for exploitation, the blurring of lines between family life and brand promotion, and the often unrealistic expectations these curated feeds perpetuate. And while his commentary can be biting, even harsh at times, it's important to recognize that he's not advocating for a complete ban on parents sharing photos of their kids online. His point, more often than not, is about balance, about being mindful of the potential consequences of our digital footprints, and the importance of protecting the privacy and well-being of our children. He's not saying all influencer parents are bad, but rather that we need to be critical consumers of these online narratives and engage in thoughtful conversations about the ethical implications of raising kids in the age of social media. The same can be said for his critiques of traditional gender roles in parenting. He's not advocating for fathers to abandon their families or for mothers to shoulder the entirety of the childcare burden. His goal, more often than not, is to challenge outdated notions of masculinity, to encourage fathers to be more present and engaged caregivers, and to create a more equitable division of labor within families. Section 6: Beyond the laughs, sparking conversations that matter. While the Dad Challenge might be packaged as a comedy podcast, its impact extends far beyond cheap laughs and witty one-liners. At its core, the show serves as a catalyst for important conversations about fatherhood, parenting in the digital age, and the often unrealistic expectations placed upon modern families. One of the show's greatest strengths is its ability to make listeners feel seen and heard. In a world where dads are often relegated to the sidelines of parenting discussions, Mike's voice offers a refreshing alternative. He speaks directly to the anxieties, frustrations, and joys of fatherhood, creating a space where men can feel comfortable discussing the challenges and rewards of raising children without fear of judgment or ridicule. This is particularly important in the context of evolving gender roles and expectations. As more fathers embrace active and engaged caregiving, they often find themselves navigating uncharted territory, lacking the support systems and role models that have traditionally been available to mothers. The Dad Challenge provides a much-needed platform for these men to connect, share experiences, and offer advice and encouragement to one another. But the show's impact goes beyond simply providing a space for dads to commiserate. By tackling difficult and often taboo topics, Mike challenges listeners to think critically about their own parenting choices and the broader societal forces that shape our experiences as parents. He encourages us to question the status quo, to challenge harmful stereotypes, and to advocate for a more equitable and supportive world for all families. His discussions about the commodification of childhood in the digital age are particularly timely and relevant. As our lives become increasingly intertwined with social media, it's crucial to have open and honest conversations about the potential consequences for our children. The Dad Challenge serves as a vital reminder that our kids are not props or brand extensions, but individuals deserving of privacy, respect, and protection. Moreover, the show's willingness to address issues like mental health, work-life balance, and the challenges of maintaining relationships amidst the chaos of parenthood helps normalize these often stigmatized topics. By sharing his own struggles and vulnerabilities, Mike encourages listeners to do the same, fostering a sense of community and reminding us that we're not alone in our struggles. Section 7: Righteous anger or self-righteous ranting, walking the tightrope. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Or maybe it's more accurate to say the screaming toddler in the supermarket aisle. Not everyone's a fan of the Dad Challenge. Some folks find Mike's style abrasive, his humor a bit too biting, and his critiques downright mean-spirited. And you know what? They might have a point. The thing about humor, especially when it's laced with sarcasm and social commentary, is that it's subjective. What one person finds hilarious, another might find offensive. And when you're dealing with a topic as sensitive and personal as parenting, well, let's just say there's bound to be some disagreement. Mike's approach is undeniably polarizing. He's not afraid to call people out, to name names, and to hold individuals accountable for their actions. And in a world where we're often encouraged to be polite, to avoid conflict, and to never ever criticize someone's parenting choices, His willingness to speak his mind can feel like a breath of fresh air, or a swift kick to the shins, depending on your perspective. Those who appreciate his style often praise his honesty, his willingness to say what they're thinking, but are too afraid to voice themselves. They see him as a necessary counterpoint to the often saccharine world of online parenting, a voice of reason in a sea of curated perfection. To them, he's not being mean, he's being real. He's calling out bullshit, and sometimes bullshit needs to be called out, even if it ruffles a few feathers along the way. But then there are those who find his approach unnecessarily harsh, his tone condescending and his critiques lacking in empathy. They argue that he's too quick to judge, too eager to tear others down, and that his brand of humor is more hurtful than it is funny. They might agree with some of his points, but they take issue with his delivery, his tendency to mock and ridicule rather than engage in thoughtful debate. Section 8. In Defense of Imperfection, Why the Dad Challenge Resonates. Here's the secret sauce of the Dad Challenge, the ingredient that elevates it from just another parenting podcast to a cultural phenomenon. It embraces imperfection. In a world obsessed with curated perfection, with Instagram-worthy family photos and Pinterest-perfect parenting hacks, Mike's willingness to be messy, vulnerable, and yes, even occasionally wrong, is a breath of fresh air. He's not afraid to admit that he doesn't have all the answers, that he screws up, that he loses his temper, that he sometimes hides in the bathroom with a bag of chips just to get 5 minutes of peace and quiet. And in doing so, he gives permission to his listeners to do the same. He reassures them that it's okay to not have it all figured out, that parenting is hard, that everyone's just winging it most of the time, and that's perfectly normal. This embrace of imperfection is incredibly liberating. It takes the pressure off, allowing parents to breathe a sigh of relief and let go of the impossible standards they often set for themselves. It creates a sense of community, a shared understanding that we're all in this together, navigating the ups and downs of parenthood with varying degrees of success and sleep deprivation. The Dad Challenge also resonates because it reflects the changing dynamics of fatherhood. Gone are the days when dads were expected to be distant breadwinners, uninvolved in the day-to-day realities of raising children. Today's fathers are more likely to be active and engaged caregivers, involved in everything from diaper changes to bedtime stories. But this shift in roles hasn't always been accompanied by a corresponding shift in societal expectations. Fathers are often still held to a different standard than mothers, judged more harshly for their parenting choices, and less likely to receive support or understanding when they struggle. This is where the Dad Challenge steps in, providing a space for fathers to embrace their evolving roles without judgment. Mike's willingness to be open about his own experiences, both the triumphs and the tribulations, helps normalize the challenges and rewards of modern fatherhood, creating a community where men can feel seen, supported, and empowered to be the best dads they can be. Section 9. The Future of Fatherhood. More challenges, more conversations. So, where do we go from here? What's next for the Dad Challenge and for the broader conversations it sparks about fatherhood, parenting, and digital ethics? Well, if the past is any indication, the future promises to be just as messy, thought-provoking, and yes, probably a little bit controversial. As technology continues to evolve at a breakneck pace, so too will the challenges and opportunities it presents for families. The issues of online safety, screen time, and the commodification of childhood will only become more complex, demanding nuanced conversations and thoughtful solutions. And as societal expectations around gender roles continue to shift, so too will the conversations about fatherhood. The need for supportive communities, for resources that cater to the unique experiences of modern dads, and for honest dialogues about the joys and challenges of raising children will only grow more urgent. The Dad Challenge, with its blend of humor, social commentary, and raw honesty, is uniquely positioned to navigate these evolving landscapes. By continuing to ask tough questions, challenge the status quo, and provide a platform for diverse voices and perspectives, the show has the potential to shape the future of fatherhood in profound ways. But it's not just up to one podcast, however influential it may be, to affect change. It's up to all of us, as parents, educators, policymakers, and members of a global community, to engage in these critical conversations, to listen to one another with empathy and respect, and to work together to create a world where all families can thrive. We need to move beyond the outrage, the knee-jerk reactions, and the temptation to reduce complex issues to simplistic sound bites. We need to embrace nuance, acknowledge the diversity of experiences within families, and approach these conversations with a spirit of collaboration and a genuine desire to understand perspectives different from our own. The future of fatherhood, like the future of parenting itself, is a work in progress. But by continuing to challenge norms, dismantle harmful stereotypes, and support one another in our shared journey of raising the next generation, we can create a world where all dads and all families have the opportunity to thrive.